Welcome to another episode of Dynamics Compass, where we interview the experts so you don't have to figure it out the hard way. Today's guest has spent over 25 years in supply chain and warehouse management, including writing WMS software that ended up at both Manhattan and Microsoft. He spent 20 years at Blue Horseshoe building out their supply chain practice before it was acquired by Accenture, and now serves as VP of Pre-Sales at MCA Connect. Steve Shebuski, is that how you say it? Shebuski?
Shebuski, yeah, but that's
Shebuski.
good. It
Shebuski.
was a roll the dice. Good job.
Steve has seen more warehouse implementations go right and wrong than most people in this ecosystem, and he's got opinions about why. So very excited to have you today, Steve. Thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rory. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I do always start with an icebreaker question. I know a lot of people know about you already, but could you please share something that not a lot of people know about you yet?
Oh, sure. Well, I guess in my free time, so I used to be a big soccer player, but I took a lot of injuries, as you may know,
As you do.
playing the sport. But so now, avid CrossFitter and like to lift heavy. So that's kind of what I do in my free time. When I'm not with my two boys, I got 17 and a 14-year-old, which keep me busy. But
Oh,
you
bet.
know, I enjoy that 5:30 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. That's what I do. So, just kind of, something I've done for a long time. So just something people don't usually know about me because it's in the wee hours of morning when the rest of my family's sleeping.
Sleeping.
They don't miss me.
Yeah. I've got the same. I used to set my alarm 4:30 to wake up and get
Mhm.
everything done before I had to make breakfast for my kids.
That's right. Yep.
So I love that. What
Get
was
home
your
before. What's
yeah,
that?
before no, get home before everyone wakes up. I was gonna ask, what was your position on the field?
Well, you know, over the years as I moved up in playing higher levels, I kept moving backwards, which has to do with my skill. So, I finished playing marking back uh, at Michigan State, actually, back in the day. So in
Yeah,
college.
I think defenders are underappreciated, but they're actually the first. Johan Cruyff, the best football player, Dutch,
Yeah,
obviously, said the first attacker is defender. Well, it's actually the goalie, but after that, it's the defenders. You're
that's
still
right.
part of the
I like
offense.
that point of view. Although, it's not where the excitement is these days. But looking forward to the
Yeah,
World Cup. It's going to be awesome.
yeah, for sure. All right, let's dive in. You
So,
wrote, as I said with the intro, you wrote WMS systems that ended up at Manhattan and Microsoft. How has that shaped the way you think about warehouse implementations throughout your career?
that's a good question. I think, starting it was interesting to start where I started, which was writing the software, and sort of quickly get into deploying it. 'Cause it gave me a really deep appreciation for the gap, especially around WMS between software design and operational reality, right? So when you're in the beginning and you're writing WMS software, you're thinking about logic, location directives, work creation, task interleaving, whatever it is. Um, but when you get into the real world, you're thinking about how to deal with turnover, different equipment and congestion in aisles, inaccurate item dimensions, changing order profiles, things that impact our warehouse managers every day. And that's where you win and lose. So, so to me, that's my mindset today. Warehouse always wins. Design must match like how the operation actually flows and works.
Yeah,
So process first, technology second. And so that you know, it was an interesting perspective out of the gate, and probably would have been better to do it in reverse in hindsight. But gives me a lot, kind of helps me sort of think about in both ways from a technology perspective, because you can't completely abandon that. You want to direct people down a path of that will actually work in the software, but at the same time, it's that focus in operations that really defines whether you'll be successful in
Yeah.
WMS. Yeah.
Was there, so I've never used WMS. Was there, since you done it twice and sold it twice, was there a big difference between what you wrote the first time and what you wrote the second time?
I mean, we like to think we kept getting better at it. But yeah, I mean, the biggest difference with Microsoft was really about writing a solution within ERP to help with one source of inventory, which is sort of for anybody that's implemented best of breed WMS knows the pain that goes with those integrations. They are the most complicated, in my opinion, besides maybe commerce, probably the most complicated integrations that you can do. And
Yeah.
keeping inventory balance between those two things is always challenging. You have to really map out all your exception scenarios and really understand, both things that you'll do systematically and with process. So, being able to sort of address that in one platform was certainly, it had its constraints, but it also, obviously has its benefits.
Yeah. And just made it a powerful solution.
Mhm.
Um,
Um,
we talked about this earlier. Like a lot of people approach WMS the same way they approach ERP Finance.
mhm.
Why doesn't that work?
Well, I think, if you think about finance, there's standard, it's transactional, right? Their systems are about consistency, standardization. Warehouses are about variability in the physical, right?
Yeah.
So we're working with physical equipment, human beings, um, you know, forklifts, cherry pickers, AMRs, and robotics. Um, we're looking at variants at different points in time all the time. Every warehouse to every warehouse, product dimensions, order profiles, picking strategies, SKU profiles, labor models, whatever, all these different things that you have to think about in terms of your design of both process and technology. Finance is really about designing understanding what you want the outcomes, and there's really sort of a kind of a clear path about how you do that, and there's not these sort of physical things that impact your world. So,
Yeah.
that would be the most obvious stuff that I can think of. That comes to mind.
Yeah. That I guess you've answered the next question then already because on an earlier conversation you and I had, you also said that you've never deployed the same WMS template twice in your
Yeah.
entire career. What does that tell us about the nature of WMS projects compared to other parts of Dynamics 365?
I mean, it's like one of the challenges and one of the things that makes me love it, right? Like it's always going to be a little bit different. It's a new challenge, a new problem, a new puzzle to solve.
Hmm.
Um, when you think about deployments, even it's something that's hard to explain to customers when they have 11 warehouses. It's like we can create a template about how your general product profiles and rules and different things, but every building will be a little bit different in terms of how it flows, um, how it's designed, where things are, the people, the temperature, what products they sell in this warehouse versus another one, what mix, all those things are going to be a little bit different. So you're always going to have a little bit of a different problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
With every deployment. And so, the challenge is trying to come up with things that are repeatable and then, make sure you leave room for things that need to be very specific to the building. So, but that's really the reason. And at MCA Connect, it's why we, are always talking to, like, our consultants are, design the operation process first, understand how goods move through a building, and then configuration and technology second.
Yeah. I think that's the right order, especially after everything that you just explained.
Yeah,
What then has
awesome.
been the most common disaster you've walked into on a WMS project, and what went wrong?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think, for a lot of folks, if you really haven't, worked in warehouses, or I've seen this a lot where you take the, the Microsoft sort of demo setups and things and you try to deploy them in a standard way. I mean, what you're going to see symptoms like poorly designed pick paths, no slotting strategy, um, not any sort of definition of labor standards or the types of equipment that's being used and how they work together. What's the strategy for put away versus allocation, and how do those things, those philosophies work in unison? Over time to try to make sure we're putting things in the optimal place and then picking them where they sit. Um, what's our weighting strategy, and is it different based on the different order profiles? Like, if you're not consider when the places that we go into that are having problems, it's try to one size fits all and try to make WMS sort of a standard process. And for most
Yeah.
folks, and especially now when we're seeing for manufacturers and distributors, they're adding channels all the time, right? So whether it's big box retail, DSD, e-commerce, marketplaces like Amazon, whatever it is, all of those things are going to be different in terms of how those entities order SKU mixes and different things, which is going to result in different process. So and most times, folks want that warehouse to support all of the above. So, which
Mhm.
requires some real strategic thinking about process and tooling.
Yeah. Um, I forgot the exact words that you just used, but where um, clients want to use a template or whatever they've implemented, apply that to several warehouses.
Yeah.
Does that Do you see that a lot that clients want that? Because it sounds, by what you're saying, it
I
sounds
think
like
it's
every
I think it's just
warehouse.
more the guidance that folks get. I think um, when I go into places and help them, which is a common practice for us to go in and look at process and look for optimization results. I mean, you'll see things like um, like I just mentioned, or over time, something that was a temporary fix, like, hey, this is going to be we're starting in the B2C world, so this will be my B2C aisle. But then you start picking units for other channels, and it's like, well, now I've got unit picking in this aisle, and then I'm breaking cases in what was an LTL aisle, which now means I got a mix of broken cases and units, which is obviously not optimal, as opposed to trying to design a single flow through of case picking versus maybe each picking in a certain area or multiple areas versus pallet picking, and how those different profiles would work together based on what you're trying to ship. So those types of things, they can be from the initial implementation, or more commonly, warehouses erode over time because the business changes, right? And
Yeah.
so what worked in one moment in time isn't going to be the same because a business adds channels, it adds complexity, it adds new products, and you can have to continue to evolve your warehouse implementation based on those changes. That's probably the biggest thing that we see, is just that over time, a lot of the efficiencies have eroded, or decisions that made a lot of sense at one point in time are no longer valid, and there's some optimization that's available.
Yeah. This might be a very ignorant question.
Mhm,
Once a customer has implemented WMS or AWM,
mhm.
it's completely done. Does that make it more painful to now make changes to the warehouse?
I mean, it can, depending on what you need to do. There's I'll take this opportunity to talk about something we've been working on.
Sure.
The one thing that we see a lot is just slotting in general. Like, hey, I've got some fixed locations about where some high moving items and where I want to pick them based on their throughput, and that evaluation of those SKUs and where they should be slotted. Should they be in this 2 pallet pushback, a 10 case flow rack, just a regular rack location on the floor, whatever it is, based on, their volumes to try to minimize replenishment and optimize throughput, reduce travel time, whatever it is. Those types of things are hard to evaluate. And you need to have the right analytics in place. One of the things we just did with all the new MCP server stuff is we actually wrote a slotting agent that we taught it all the math of what I just talked about.
Hmm.
Um, and it helps warehouse managers come up with, hey, if I were to move 2 things around today or 5 things, I have time to move 5 things around today. What would be the 5 most impactful things that I could reslot today that would help me with my throughput tomorrow, as an example? And make those recommendations and then do the work and automatically tell Dynamics to go do the work. So I think to answer your question, it's sometimes like physically moving products around is painful. A lot of times, if you're adding entire channels, you may want to introduce new picking methodologies like cluster picking or, batch picking cases for a parcel carrier in a a batch mode where I'm just pulling a pallet across a lot of different orders. If all of a sudden I start doing that, the strategies, or if all of a sudden I get into B2C and I got somebody ordering, singles, like 1 unit of an item over and over. Like there's optimization opportunities for those types of processes that, as they get introduced that you'd want to take advantage of. So some of them are systematic, some of them are physical, some of them are both. And it's really something where the analytics around WMS is super critical, Roy. Like you've got to pay attention to your order profiles and how are they changing. My SKU profiles, my mix in an order, what they look like, how many picks per order, my travel time. And if those things start trending in different directions, that tells warehouse managers like, customers are buying in different ways or we're introducing new things. And I may need to go look at ways to continuously optimize.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that the example
Yeah.
what you're working on as well. That's very exciting. Um, I'm
Yeah.
sure Doug Collifield was involved.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah. He's the
yeah,
guy.
yeah,
I just explained to him, how us old warehouse managers downloaded all the data in Excel and then all the pivot and math we did to get to the outcomes. And then he took all that learning and literally just taught the agent the parameters and the math. So pretty cool stuff.
that's
Really exciting.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Mhm.
Um, when you're saving a project, um, is it usually technology that's a problem or something else?
Um, I would say that pretty much never is it the technology, right? Maybe somebody's using the wrong sort of gear for the wrong job. I've seen that every once in a while in some smaller warehouses when they're trying to scan way up in the air with a phone or something. But I mean, at the end of the day, most of the time it's just really what we've been talking about, where
Hmm.
you know, and to most partners' credit, it's like it's really because the business changes from when they went live to where they're at, and they just need to continuously optimize what they're doing. And so it's a good point too to the folks that we talk to and like our managed services group is to always be, connecting with folks on that. And it's also just shows how important it is to be able to measure the business, right?
Yeah,
Those order profiles I was talking about, and your pick cycle times, and your travel times, and your mix. If you're not measuring that stuff, then you're not going to be. It's not going to be obvious to you at first when it starts to change until things really start to erode.
yeah. Okay. Which ties into the next question, which is close to my heart as well, or
Mm-hmm.
my line of work. You've said that the best hires come from Amazon warehouse floors. Wh- What should companies be looking for when they're staffing or evaluating talent for these kind of projects that you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, my experience, having come from implementing different WMSs myself, um, that nothing's like super earth shattering has happened in terms of how WMS systems work in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
I think, like the general concepts and things are relatively the same. And so I feel like, you folks that have worked the warehouse and done the work, especially, or led teams that have done the work, are the best positioned to really help customers, look at their processes, especially if they're trying to, they're in, older systems or, not have a WMS and moving to WMS in the future to really, look at their process, help them understand how their process, can be optimized, and then how to introduce technology into that process in the most efficient way. So we don't want to slow folks down, right? We want to the best that we can. Now, it's always going to be faster not to scan or record anything. So we're always
Hmm.
probably going to that's one thing I always talk to, customers about is like we're going to probably going to slow folks down if they're working off paper and you have folks that have been in here for 15 years, those guys are going to they're going to go slower than they used to, but you'll be able to onboard new people faster. And when we start increasing the volume and scaling, we'll be able to do more with less. And so that's usually the goal, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, just looking at those kinds of people understand that kind of stuff and how to introduce it. So really, you really look for folks with that background and that experience first. Hopefully they'd worked with some kind of WMS system, and I feel like you can teach them dynamics. It's very intuitive. UI is visible,
Yeah.
and so that's what we've seen in our past.
Yeah. And especially if you're saying that technology is hardly ever the issue when
Yeah,
you're jumping into a failed project or a rescue, then it's about people being aware of the processes and having that lens on, um, which that's a lot harder to learn than the technology itself.
yeah. I think I think the other thing, to Microsoft's credit that we see a lot of is, Microsoft mirrors us. They've done a ton of investment into WMS in the last 5 or 6 years, and so a lot of times things that were customizations or clunky or not as optimal in the past have been addressed in this solution, and that's just another place where that continuous evaluation of your processes and new stuff like Mirzo sent out a note on LinkedIn today about new optimization capabilities that are going into private preview, kind of different slotting things that I just talked about, slotting methodologies and things, introduction of XYZ coordinates, which is super exciting for unlocking task interleaving or labor standards. So lots of stuff coming all the time, which a lot of times will change sort of how you address some of the gaps.
Yeah. Um, coming back to the people that you would hire from from Amazon. What questions do you ask in an interview to uncover if they've got the goods, if they've not been a WMS consultant?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, what questions do I ask my WMS folks? I don't know. I mean, I think I like to give them real world scenarios of like um, order profiles or things, or um, you know, things like um, if I'm looking at a scenario where I'm replenishing particular location, 7 times a day. What's the best way to reduce that replenishment volume and increase overall throughput? Things of that nature that are more like just sort of operational in nature. How do you? What's the best way? Best practices around integrating to an ASRS. What's best practices around doing fulfillment in a warehouse that delivers on their own fleet with routes and stops? Things that, kind of show various experiences depending on what industry you're in. If you're in the manufacturing industry, it might be more around pulling parts, in an optimal way to routing, like really focus on the scenarios. Strong candidates are going to talk about SKU velocities and the profiles and the labor productivity and pick path optimization and, storage optimization and replenishment strategies, put away strategies, picking strategies based on what the order looks like, things of that nature. And so, if they start telling me about flags in the system, it's usually as a red
Yeah.
flag for me.
Yeah.
Kind of focusing on, what they would do with the operation first and then how they make it so.
Yeah. I I should have asked you at the start, but you come from the shop floor yourself before you
I did
started writing?
I did not. So like I was saying, I started writing WMS systems with no idea what they did. But I had good teachers around me, and that's what I was saying. When I got into actually being on the floor, it was like eye-opening to me about, you know, the approach that we should have taken in certain cases and making things more flexible. That's why I said also that we feel like we continuously did it better the second and third time we were writing these things because we were really thinking about that kind of stuff. Although back in the day we had some really smart folks that knew both and were more
Mhm.
guiding us on that journey. But yeah, that those things kind of you know became obvious to me not till later in my career. So.
Yeah. That's that's good. Um, Microsoft keeps pushing quick start guides and auto configurations for
Mhm,
WMS. What's your
mhm.
take on whether those tools help or hurt?
Um, I think all that's, there's so much stuff about, especially with agents and auto configuring environments and things. And I think it's awesome. I think that in the world of WMS and manufacturing on shop floors, we're still a little ways from auto configuring a production environment. Um, but in terms of setting up something for learning the system, quick start tools for demos, prototypes, understanding client demos, that kind of stuff. Sure. I mean, those are really good tools. Um, I think for, going through the process for configuring a WMS for, future state, we really want to focus on those end to end flows. And maybe someday, we'll be able to interpret those requirements and auto configure flows that way. I think we're still, you know, we'll let them get through finance and the transactional stuff first on auto configuring all of that before we take on the operational world. But for
Yeah.
now, we're gonna go through the process um, that we go through. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you get to design a lot still in your current role in pre-sales?
I do. It is the reason I'm in this business. It's like I said, it just kind of gets me up out of bed every day. Every client that I get to meet has different constraints, different products, um, old
Yeah.
buildings, new buildings, greenfield, brownfield, on an older WMS, whatever it is, so many different combinations. Want to now with the introduction of robotics, especially here in the US, ramping up so quickly, like the introduction of robotics in a lot of our steps instead of humans everywhere. Um, every day's a new day. So
Yeah.
exciting stuff.
Yeah. Because I can tell you're very passionate about the shop floor and processes and making improvements for your customers. I was
Yeah,
wondering.
that's me. That's really about how we approach things from obviously a sales and an implementation perspective is got to be there, got to be on the floor, got to be walking it to understand it, touch it, feel it, and see it. And so those are the opportunities I still love to take for sure.
Do you have anyone on your team who's fully remote then?
Um, Not on my team.
No. Okay. I do come across them, where like I don't travel. I've done it in the past. I've always done it from home, so I've proven I can done it. But like, surely you want to have a look at your client site and how everything runs.
I would tend to agree.
All right. Um, last one. If a decision maker listening to everything you shared today and is about to kick off a WMS project, what's the one thing they should demand?
um, I think that what should the client demand? I think, I think, you know, everyone should really have, like we've been talking about, um, be able to work with a team, especially from an implementation perspective, that's really going to focus on how do we get the most bang for our buck with this Dynamics tool, right? We're going to put this technology in place. And the way that you do that isn't necessarily business as usual. So, looking for a team that's going to challenge them on their processes, help them optimize where those opportunities take place, help them measure if they can't measure it. That's what we talk about a lot in WMS land. The only way to really know if you're making any sort of improvements is to measure it, and before and after, and be able to make sure you have a clear path on how you're going to do that, so that you can understand the outcomes and constantly improve. I think that's one of the main things that we always focus on is, WMS is not one shot and done. It's continuous optimization. We're going to land, and then we're gonna make improvements over time, and we want to enable our clients to have the tools and understanding of the solution so they can do that themselves. So I would expect all of that from my partner to be able to enable those things in a project.
Yeah. That made me think of another question actually, because you mentioned just now uh, that they should want to be challenged on their process and help to improve their processes. Um, are clients very open to that? That you go in and say, hey, if you want to go for Microsoft Dynamics WMS, you're gonna have to change your processes. Do you get a lot of pushback there or not really?
I mean, sometimes, it's a give and take, right? I think our clients' expectations of us should be that we're bringing that thought leadership and experience to the table, and where we see benefit. There's times when our customer, we might recommend something, but we don't understand some other variable in their business of why that, in June will cause complete chaos. And so we do it this way,
Yeah,
as an example. So, it's a give and take. We like to roll the ball out, like we like to say, on what, our thought leadership and our experience, and then make sure that our customers are bringing their knowledge of the business and why they've been successful, as they had been to be taking on this project. And we put those things together to develop a best in class model.
yeah. No, that's good. I get you've got that reputation that you've been in
Yeah,
the industry, you and MCA Connect, to have earned
appreciate that. Yeah,
yeah
awesome.
earned the right to challenge people on their processes. Yeah.
That's what it's all
Thanks
about.
so much. Thanks so much for coming on, Steve.
Yeah.
Lot of wisdom. I have to admit though, there were a few, well, a bunch of terms and abbreviations that you use that I'll have to Google them.
Oh
Um,
man, I'm trying not to do that too, Rory. You should call me out on that. Everyone else does.
the,
You like get going too excited and too fast. So
I I'm
try
assuming I'm
to.
assuming the ones that will listen to this are interested in the topic
They'll
and
know.
they
Yeah,
know what you're talking
they'll
about.
know. Yeah.
But yeah, you're very knowledgeable. I did learn a bunch of things here, so thank you so much for coming on, and I hope
Yeah,
anyone
thanks for
watching
having me
this,
and for connecting me to your audience here, and look forward to seeing everyone at the event. So appreciate it, and it's great connecting with you.
yeah, we'll stay in touch for sure, Steve.
All right.
All right. Thanks for watching another episode of Dynamics Compass. I started doing the podcast because in my work as a recruiter, I was speaking to all these Dynamics decision makers that had the same kind of questions. So I figured, well, I have a big network of Microsoft Dynamics experts. Why don't I just approach them, interview them, record it, and make all the answers freely available? So if there's a question that you really want answered that is Dynamics related, let me know. Find me on LinkedIn or write to me on Rory at thegoodtalent.co, and I'll find the expert, I'll interview them, and make it freely available so you're informed and you can keep progressing your Microsoft Dynamics journey. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great day.